Hello, welcome to the 4.06 review on transforming quadratic functions. We're going to go ahead and get started with question number 1, which is just like your question number 1 on your quiz. So it says, which answer describes the transformation of f of x equals x squared plus 2? Okay, so that is our original function, that f of x equals x squared plus 2. And then we're transforming to g of x equals the quantity of 6 or x plus 6 all squared plus 2. So we want to see how did it change from my initial function f of x to that new function g of x. So if I look closely at the differences, the first one just had this x squared term, but this when we transformed it, it changed to x plus 6. Okay, so now notice if we look down here at our general function for transforming a quadratic, when we change what is happening to the x, this tells us how we are shifting in the horizontal direction. Okay, so horizontal, remember that is your left and right. And the other thing that you need to remember is that the sign is going to be opposite when we take it out, when we're talking about how we move in that horizontal direction. So since I have a plus 6 right here, this really means that I'm moving negative 6. It's opposite. Okay, so I'm moving to the left 6 units. Another way is it's horizontally. Mrs. Stanley can't spell very well. Okay, so it's moving horizontally to the left 6 units. And I can't remember if they use the word horizontal or not in your answer choices, so I just have it there just in case. Okay? So then if we look really quick just to make sure nothing else has changed, I still had this plus 2, which means it was shifted up 2 units, but it hasn't changed. It's still plus 2, so there's nothing else that has changed in this function. It's just that we did this plus 6 inside of our parenthesis part with the x squared, and remember we take the opposite out when we're dealing with that horizontal component, the part with the x. Okay, your h is always opposite in terms of the sign. So that concludes question number 1. Okay, really quick, I just stopped to check. This is not supposed to say to, it's supposed to say is, which is what I thought, but I wanted to double check because it changes the meaning a little bit of our problem. So it says the quadratic function g of x is f of x translated 4 units up. So my new function basically has just been shifted up 4 units. Okay, so if we're talking about being shifted up 4 units, remember that my vertical part, that is going to be this plus k. Okay, this is my vertical change. Okay, and if we're going up 4, we're going in the positive direction 4 units. So what we need to do is we need to take our original function f of x and we just need to add 4 to the end of it. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We're adding 4. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my f of x function, that 3x squared minus 10, and I'm going to substitute that in right here. So I'm going to end up with 3x squared minus 10 plus 4, because I'm shifting it 4 units up. And then we just combine like terms, so 3x squared, this is going to turn into a minus 6. I was originally 10 units down, but I've moved it 4 units up, so now I'm only 6 units down from the origin, or from that 0, 0 spot. So there is my new equation, g of x, after we have translated it 4 units up. All right, so question number 3. Let f of x equal 3/4 x squared minus 3. It says that the function g of x is a vertical stretch of f of x by a factor of 12. Write the equation for g of x. Okay, so here we have our original, our f of x. So original function is our starting point. And this time we are translating it by a vertical shift of a factor of 12. This a term, that is our vertical shift factor. So we're literally just going to take our f of x to get g of x, and we're going to multiply the whole thing by 12. So I'm going to take all of this, substitute it in here, and multiply it by 12 to get my g of x. So g of x equals 12 times 3/4 x squared minus 3. And then we just simplify. So I've got this 12 out front of a set of parentheses, so we know we need to distribute. So 12 times 3/4 is going to give us 9x squared. And then 12 times -3 is going to be -36. So my new function, after we've had a vertical stretch by a factor of 12, is going to be 9x squared minus 36. All right, so that takes care of question number 3. Go ahead and answer that one, and we'll move on to question number 4. So in question 4, the graph of the function g of x is a transformation of the parent function f of x equals x squared. So the parent function, that's our starting point, that's our original. And you can see that right here in red. It's labeled for you. And I want to know which equation describes the function of g of x. And you're going to have options for this one, but we're going to go ahead and just look to see what happened to it. So if I look at my original function, f of x, and I look at this new function, g of x, I see that it's been shifted, it's moved right, okay? So my vertex of both of these, notice how it's only been shifted to the right. It hasn't been shifted up or down or anything, just to the right. And it looks like we've gone over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units. So we added 6 units in the right direction. Okay, now that horizontal direction, remember, that is this part of our transformation. Okay, so this minus h. So my g of x is just going to equal x. Now we added 6. Remember, when we plug it in, it's going to be opposite, so it's going to turn into a minus 6 all squared. And that's it. There's no plus k in this situation because we did not shift the graph up or down at all. It just went to the right. So since it just went to the right, we're only dealing with this horizontal component. There is no vertical stretch, so we're not dealing with the a. And this would be our new equation. All right, so that takes care of question 4. Last question, question number 5. The graph of the function f of x is shown. So we have that graph here. It says to use the parabola tool to graph g of x. And it tells us what g of x is, x plus 4 all squared minus 2. It says to graph the parabola first by plotting its vertex and then plotting the second point on the parabola. Now, if you remember, our vertex is just our h and our k. And we can get that by looking at our 2 values that are given to us. Here's my h, here's my k. Remember that h is always the opposite. So since this is a positive 4, my h is really a negative 4. So I've shifted negative 4 units in the left direction. And I've also shifted down 2, that plus k. Here I've got a minus 2, so I've gone down 2 units. So there's my vertex of my new function. So that's the first point you're going to graph. So over negative 4, down 2, and we have our vertex. Okay, so we've talked a little bit before about how to find that second point. And you really can just take another value and plug it in for x to get that next one. And I usually just go, since I was at -4, I go 1 next to it. So I'm going to go ahead and just see what happens when I substitute in, oops, there we go. When I substitute in -3 for x. And again, you could pick pretty much any other number here, but I'm just going 1 next to my vertex. So -3 plus 4 gives me 1. 1 squared is 1. 1 minus 2 is -1. So when I plugged in -3, g of -3 equals -1. So that means I'd go over 1, 2, 3, down 1. There's my second point. And then your OHS is going to go ahead and graph this for you. And it would look something like that. Okay? So find your vertex using your H and your K. Pick a second point, graph it, bam, you've got your parabola and you are all finished. All right, so I hope that helps you finish up your 4.06 quiz, and we will see you next time.